Hi there, I'm Tom from Danfoss Climate Solutions.
In this video, we'll give you some tips how to assemble the EVT direct operated solenoid valve, which you see here, so that you minimize service costs and ensure safe and reliable valve operation. Here you see the tools which you can use to assemble the EVT valve. And here you see the available spare part kits for the direct operated EVT valve. You can use a seal kit or service kit, depending on what kind of service you're going to do. Please note that whenever you take the valve apart and reassemble it, you should always replace the metal gasket, seen here. When the valve is assembled, this gasket forms a metallic sealing through a minor metallic deformation. This metallic deformation is permanent, and therefore the gasket should not be reused, since there is then a risk of external leakage once the valve is back in operation. So always replace the metal gasket. For this purpose, you can use the seal kit seen here. If you also need to replace other worn internal valve parts, then you can use the service kit seen here. Firstly, carefully mount a new metal gasket into the valve body. Then mount the armature into the armature tube. Make sure that the armature spring is correctly mounted into the armature, as seen here. It is important that the armature spring is mounted so that the tight windings are pointing out of the armature, as seen here. This spring design ensures that the spring does not tilt and get damaged during compression when the valve is opened. This ensures a long spring lifetime and therefore also a reliable valve operation with long lifetime. Now carefully mount the armature tube assembly onto the valve body and tighten it by hand, as seen here. Make sure that the armature spring remains in the armature during assembly, so that it does not fall out and stay loose inside the armature tube, as seen here in this example, causing incorrect operation of the valve once assembled. Then carefully tighten the armature tube assembly by using two wrenches, as seen here. One wrench for tightening the assembly and one wrench for counter-holding the valve body to avoid stressing the valve connections and the piping. Torque tighten the armature tube assembly to 80 Newton meter. Before mounting the coil, it is recommended to replace the coil O-ring, seen here. This O-ring is by compression sealing against moist ingress into the coil, which might cause the coil to burn out. Since the EVT valve is designed for high temperature operation, the coil O-ring elasticity might get less over time, and if reused during valve service, there might be a risk of less sealing capability, risk of moist ingress into the coil, and therefore risk of coil damage. So replace the coil O-ring. Mount the new coil O-ring onto the armature tube. Then mount the coil onto the armature tube and press by hand until you hear and feel a click. This ensures that the coil is correctly mounted and that the sealing between valve and coil is correct. Now for disassembly of the direct operated EVT valve, have a look at the separate video about this and follow the important tips we give. And have a look at the other online learnings about the EVT CO2 solenoid valve. So now you know how to assemble the EVT direct operated solenoid valve and why it is important always to replace the valve gasket and the coil O-ring if you service this valve, and why it is important to locate the armature spring correctly in the armature and ensure it remains there during assembly. This way ensuring you have a safe and reliable valve operation with minimum service costs.